Darius never imagined changing his Wi-Fi password would expose his seemingly perfect neighbor's secret criminal empire, until police lights flooded his quiet suburban street. What started as fixing slow internet revealed something far more sinister, hiding behind Karen's manicured lawn and forced smile. When entitled Karen stormed his porch demanding her internet back, Darius had no idea her desperation wasn't just about convenience, it was about hiding evidence that could put her away for decades. The router logs revealed a digital underworld of identity theft, hate crimes, and trafficking that would shock even veteran detectives. She called the cops thinking she'd intimidate him into silence. Instead, she personally delivered all the evidence needed to destroy her life. Wait until you see what happened when the handcuffs came out. It's the justice moment you won't want to miss. Darius frowned at his frozen screen, third time this week. His router blinked ominously, a silent witness to whatever was draining his bandwidth. He had worked hard to afford his home in this upscale neighborhood and took pride in his space, enjoying the peace that came with living in a well-maintained community. But lately, something strange had been happening. His Wi-Fi had been running unusually slow. At first, he brushed it off, thinking maybe there were just too many devices connected. But as the lag continued, he decided to check his router settings. That's when he noticed an unfamiliar device using his network. "What the hell?" he muttered, leaning closer to the screen. The mysterious connection had been active for months, regularly connecting late at night. One password reset later, Karen's rage would unravel a digital nightmare he never saw coming. Annoyed, he immediately changed the password, unknowingly setting off a chain of events that would expose far more than just a stolen internet connection. The next morning, as Darius was sipping his coffee on his porch, neighbor Karen Whitmore stormed onto his property without so much as a knock. She was a middle-aged woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, an entitled glare, and an unmistakable air of superiority. Karen's stiletto heel stabbed his porch. "You'll give me that password or I'll make sure this neighborhood remembers exactly who you are," she hissed, her manicured finger pointing at his face. Darius was taken aback. He had barely spoken to this woman since moving in, yet she was acting as if he owed her an explanation. "Yeah, I did," he said casually. "Why?" Karen's face turned red with fury. "Because my internet stopped working. I've been using that connection for months, and now I can't do anything." Darius couldn't believe what he was hearing. She wasn't even trying to deny it. "You've been stealing my Wi-Fi?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Karen scoffed as if the very idea of stealing didn't apply to her. "It's just the internet," she said, rolling her eyes. "You people always make a big deal out of nothing. It's not like it costs you anything extra." Darius took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "It's my Wi-Fi, and I pay for it. I don't owe you access." That was the last straw for Karen. Her face twisted into an ugly expression of rage. "Oh, I see what's going on," she sneered. "You don't belong in this neighborhood, and now you're trying to play games with the people who actually do. I'm calling the police." Darius barely had time to react before Karen whipped out her phone and dialed 911. He listened in disbelief as she fabricated a story on the spot. "There's a suspicious man in my neighborhood," she said, forcing fake panic into her voice. "He's trying to hack into people's homes. He's harassing me right now. I feel threatened." Darius leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Ma'am, I'd save the performance," he muttered, as Karen clutched her pearls for the cameras she wished were here. She thought she had power, thought she could manipulate the system, but Karen had no idea what was coming. As Darius stood there waiting for the inevitable arrival of the police, he refused to panic. He wasn't about to let Karen intimidate him. If anything, he was curious to see just how deep this rabbit hole went. She had openly admitted to using his Wi-Fi, but why had she been so desperate to keep it? With nothing else to do but wait, he walked back inside, sat at his desk, and pulled up his router's connection history. The screen glowed, 2:47 a.m., a forum post titled, "Teach Them a Lesson." His coffee turned to acid. Deeper, encrypted payments, a login attempt to a site with a name he'd never repeat. The results sent a chill down his spine. At first, he saw the usual activity, basic browsing and streaming, but the deeper he looked, the more disturbing things became. There were multiple forums filled with hate speech, conspiracy theories, and calls for violence. Karen had spent hours on these sites, posting under anonymous usernames, spewing venom about minorities and even doxing people she didn't like. That was bad enough, but then he found something worse. Buried in the data were encrypted transactions linked to fraudulent activities. Someone, Karen, most likely, had been running online scams, selling stolen goods through various marketplaces. There were even traces of what looked like identity theft, credit card information being processed through shady websites. Darius leaned back in his chair, exhaling sharply. This woman had been committing serious crimes all while pretending to be a victim, and she had been using his Wi-Fi to do it, probably thinking it would make her harder to trace. His jaw clenched. She had called the police on him over an internet password, yet she was the real criminal. Then he spotted one final damning detail: a login attempt to an illegal site flagged for trafficking explicit material. Darius's stomach turned. If the authorities dug into her browsing history, there was no telling what else they would find. He quickly took screenshots, saving everything onto a USB drive. Karen had spent years believing she could get away with anything, hiding behind her privilege and weaponizing the police whenever she wanted. But this time, she had picked the wrong person to mess with. The sound of sirens cut through the afternoon air, growing louder as a patrol car pulled up to Darius's driveway. 2 officers stepped out: Officer Jordan, a tall, composed black man, and Officer Miller, his shorter, stockier white partner. Both wore unreadable expressions as they approached. Karen, still standing in Darius's yard, immediately sprang into action. She rushed toward them, her face contorted in a dramatic mix of fear and outrage. "Officers, thank God you're here," she wailed, her voice shaking with fake distress. "That man," she pointed at Darius with a trembling hand, "he's been hacking into my devices. I think he's stealing personal information from the whole neighborhood. I don't feel safe." Officer Jordan narrowed his eyes. "Ma'am, slow down. What exactly happened?" Karen sucked in a shaky breath, putting on the performance of a lifetime. "I was just sitting in my home, minding my own business, when my internet stopped working. I realized he must have hacked into my network. Then when I confronted him, he got aggressive, threatened me, and refused to fix what he did. I knew I had to call you before he did something worse." Officer Miller glanced at Darius, who was standing calmly on his porch, arms crossed. He didn't look the least bit aggressive. In fact, he looked almost bored. "Sir," Officer Jordan said, turning to Darius, "what's your side of the story?" Darius sighed and gestured toward Karen. "This woman has been stealing my Wi-Fi for months. I changed my password this morning, and she showed up at my door demanding I give her access again. When I refused, she lost it and called you." Officer Jordan's face remained neutral, but Miller let out a short, skeptical chuckle. "Wait, she called the police because you changed your own Wi-Fi password?" Karen's head snapped toward Miller, her face twisting in anger. "It's more than that. He's been hacking, probably doing illegal things online. You need to check his devices before it's too late." Officer Jordan took out his notepad. "All right, let's slow down here. Karen, you're saying you believe Darius is hacking into your devices. Do you have any proof?" Karen hesitated. "Well, no, but..." "And Darius," Jordan continued, "you're saying she's been using your internet without permission?" Darius nodded. "And I can prove it." Officer Jordan and Miller exchanged a glance. Karen's story already had holes, and now the accused man was offering proof. Jordan gestured toward the house. "All right, let's see what you've got." Karen's confident smirk faltered for the first time. A flicker of unease. She had assumed the police would be on her side, as they always were. But this time, things weren't going the way she expected. Darius led the officers inside, heading straight to his computer. Karen followed reluctantly, standing near the doorway like a caged animal. Her bravado had dimmed, but she still held on to the hope that the situation would swing back in her favor. Darius plugged in his USB drive and pulled up the files he had saved. "I took a look at my router's history," he explained, clicking through the logs. "Karen's been using my Wi-Fi for a while, and the sites she's been visiting, let's just say they're not exactly legal." Officer Jordan and Officer Miller leaned in as the screen displayed the evidence. There were multiple transactions linked to fraudulent websites, messages from extremist forums filled with racist rhetoric, and worst of all, an attempt to access an illegal website flagged for child exploitation. Officer Miller let out a low whistle. "Jesus," Karen went pale. "That's not mine. He's making this up," she shrieked. Darius didn't even turn to look at her. "Karen, your IP address is right here. You were using my connection, remember? That means everything you did online was logged under my network." Officer Jordan folded his arms. "So let me get this straight. You've been piggybacking off his Wi-Fi without permission, and now you're saying he somehow fabricated all this?" Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. It's a setup. He's some kind of hacker. I told you he was dangerous." Darius finally turned to face her, a slow smirk forming. "Karen, You called the cops on me thinking I'd get in trouble, but all you did was bring them straight to your crimes. Officer Jordan exhaled through his nose, looking unimpressed. Karen, I have to say, this isn't looking good for you. Officer Miller nodded in agreement. Yeah, and you know what? I think we need to dig a little deeper into what else you've been doing. Karen's panic exploded into outright desperation. No, this isn't fair. He's the criminal. She lunged at Darius in a blind rage, her manicured nails aiming for his face. Before she could make contact, Officer Miller caught her wrist, twisting her arm behind her back. That's assault, on top of everything else, he said coolly. Karen let out a strangled scream. You can't do this. I'm the victim. You don't understand. Officer Jordan took out his radio. Dispatch, we have a suspect in custody, requesting backup for further investigation. Karen's breath hitched. Suspect? No, wait. You don't understand. Darius crossed his arms, watching as reality crashed down on her. Oh, we understand just fine. For the first time in her life, Karen realized that her cries weren't going to save her. The weight of the situation finally crashed down on her. She was the officers weren't buying her story, and now they had real evidence against her. But instead of backing down, her desperation exploded into pure rage. You lying thug! She shrieked, her face twisted in fury as she lunged at Darius again. Darius barely flinched. He had expected this, but before she could even touch him, Officer Miller grabbed her by the arms, locking her in place. Are you out of your damn mind? He barked, tightening his grip as Karen struggled like a wild animal. But she didn't care anymore. All the years of privilege and entitlement, all the times she had weaponized her tears, meant nothing now. She had lost control, and it showed. You think you're going to do this to me? She screamed, thrashing violently. I'm a white woman. You think anyone's going to believe him over me? Then, as if the situation couldn't get worse, she did the unthinkable. She turned to Officer Jordan, her eyes filled with pure hatred, and spat directly in his face. The room went dead silent. Even Officer Miller, who had been trying to restrain her gently, stiffened in shock. Darius, who had been standing with quiet amusement, felt his stomach turn. Officer Jordan wiped his face slowly, his jaw tightening. He had dealt with racism before, but this was something else. His hand hovered near his cuffs as he took a deep breath, steadying himself. Miller shook his head in disgust. Well, congratulations, Karen. You just turned a bad situation into the worst day of your life. Jordan didn't even look at her. He simply pulled out his handcuffs. Karen Whitmore, you're under arrest for assaulting an officer, cybercrime, and fraud. The moment those words left his mouth, Karen lost what little sanity she had left. No, you can't do this, she screeched, kicking wildly as Miller helped Jordan restrain her. I'm the victim. You can't do this to me. Funny. Your IP address says otherwise, Officer Jordan muttered as he secured the cuffs. Darius watched as they hauled her outside, her shrieks piercing the air. Neighbors had gathered, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. Some were filming, others whispering. Get your hands off me, Karen wailed, twisting in their grip. He's the real criminal. I was just... Her words were cut off as Officer Jordan shut the patrol car door. Miller shook his head. She just never knew when to quit, huh? Darius chuckled. Nope, but I'd say she finally ran out of luck. Jordan let out a deep sigh, glancing toward Darius. You handled that better than most people would have. Darius shrugged. Honestly, I was just waiting for karma to do its thing. Jordan smirked. Well, looks like karma had some backup today. It didn't take long for the story to spread. By the next morning, Karen Whitmore's name was plastered all over the news. The headline was brutal. Racist woman arrested after attacking black neighbor over Wi-Fi. Shocking cybercrime evidence found. The footage captured by nosy neighbors went viral. The way she screamed, the moment she spat at Officer Jordan, the arrest. It was all there in crystal clear detail, and the internet devoured it. Karen was no longer just a neighborhood menace, she was now a national disgrace. But the humiliation didn't stop there. Within days, her HOA held an emergency meeting. The decision was unanimous. Karen Whitmore was officially banned from the neighborhood. The for sale sign creaked on Karen's lawn. Her house, once her prized possession, became a financial noose around her neck. With mounting legal fees and no support from the community, foreclosure was inevitable. Meanwhile, Darius finally got what he wanted. Peace. He sat on his porch one evening, sipping coffee, his Wi-Fi stronger than ever. No more leeching, no more harassment, no more Karen barging onto his property like she owned it. His phone buzzed with a message from a friend. Bro, you're a legend. She really thought she could get away with that. LOL. Darius laughed, shaking his head. She thought she was untouchable, he muttered to himself. Guess she found out otherwise. As the sun dipped below the horizon, he took a deep breath, enjoying the quiet. Justice had been served, and for the first time in a long time, it was a good day. He smiled, savoring the silence and the sweet, unthrottled speed of karma.